Famous cowboy actor was Roy Rogers. Roy Rogers and his horse Trigger. Many of you heard of him? Roy Rogers, and he had a horse named Trigger. He's gone now, and his wife Dale Evans. All right, well, none of you have heard of him. That's understandable. All right. All right, so much for that chapter. Moving on to the next chapter, chapter 18, railroads. I'm going to skip this one pretty fast. Railroads were important. Now, the railroad is still, in 2018, the cheapest way to get a large volume of goods to the land. Now, for instance, if you work at a radio station, a part fails, if you need a certain part, you can have it air mailed to you. It's faster. But if you want to ship 300 automobiles to Mississippi or to someplace in Nevada, the cheapest way is by train. Or if you have about 50 truckloads of oil, you can put this oil on the bed of a train and ship the oil on the train, and it's still the cheapest way. And trains are still a bit faster than trucks in that your trains don't stop at crossroads. Owing to the fact that the train, they hate this. They have to stop real slowly. If they stop too fast, they're going to flatten out one edge of their wheels, and they have to spend big bucks to renew the wheel. So your train will not stop, but they don't like to stop very fast. So they keep moving, and they have the right of way. Anytime they're coming through, all car and truck traffic is expected to stop. So they can move pretty fast, but not as fast as the airplane. Also, the other thing, trucks can go places where trains can't. Trains can only go places where they're aligned. Now, initially the railroads were corrupt in their younger days, but then they got a bad press, and they started to clean up their act a little bit. Most of the rail lines that we use today were already built by the 1880s. It's hard to believe, but there have not been that many significant new rail lines built. And with a few exceptions, passenger service on the trains are discouraged. That's because, if you look at train passenger places, stations, they're usually dirty, dusty, and filthy. The trains do not really want to take passengers anymore. That's because the railroads got tired of being sued every time there was an accident. So the trains mostly haul cargo. Now, there are a few passenger trains, and some of these passenger trains anymore can go up to 180 miles an hour. And recently, one of them had a big accident. That's fast. And some of them, if they come to a turn and they fail to slow down to a turn, one of them toppled over that way. You'll hear about passenger trains having accidents from time to time. Your cargo trains do not go that fast. America's first big business was the train. Now, a big business. The trains got to be the railroad industry got to be so big that they had to depend on banks to finance them. And eventually other businesses came in big, like the steel business, the oil business. But the trains were the first big business. Now, I'll tell you, I spent 27 years working for a big business. And without paper money, without banks, your big businesses could not thrive. All right, the railroads. Now, you go from there to some big men, big names, name of Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller. All right. These men made it rich. Carnegie became rich through steel. Rockefeller through oil. The Rockefeller family is still very big. I mean, well, recently as 1976, one of the Rockefellers became vice president. Nelson Rockefeller was vice president for a while. But now, here's how they did it, folks. Both of these men started off small, but then they used ruthless tactics to put all their competition out of business. In the case of Rockefeller, he put an oil station right directly across the street from one that was already there, and he undercut it. He could underprice them because his other companies were making money. Like, for instance, he had dozens of oil firms, but he decided, I want to put the one that's here out of business. So he would underprice this man, and in the meantime, he was making all this money here. Then once he put this man out of business, he would up the price of this man's oil and help put the man over here out of business. And this went on until Rockefeller had 90% of the country's oil. Carnegie did the same thing with steel. He set up steel mills, hired workers, paid them as little as he could, and tried and put the other steel mills out of business as much as he could. Now today we have laws on the books that stop that, called antitrust laws. Mergers cannot be done without the approval of the government, and it's difficult for one man to buy out another. Again, you have to have, if Carnegie were alive today and he tried to buy out another steel company, the government would get involved, and if it were found to be contrary to trust. But the trust is in this case, the word trust means a very, very large business. Carnegie got to where he not only controlled the process of making steel, but he would control the mining of the iron, the railroad that would carry the iron from the mine to the factory, and then control the factory, and then control the middleman who sold it, which all this meant that he did not have to make a profit until he got to the final product. By that time, he could greatly undercut anyone else who had to deal with middlemen along the way. Now, a big problem that they had, they credited a man named Charles Darwin. I'm going to say more about him later. They credited Charles Darwin with giving them the moral impetus. Charles Darwin taught survival of the fittest. He believed in evolution. He believed that the strong should gobble up the weak because this would make the strong stronger. And the more weak you eliminated, now this is Darwin, not me, the more weak you eliminated, the better we all got. And this helped evolution go upward. Darwin was an evolutionist, and he believed in natural selection, survival of the fittest. And both Carnegie and Rockefeller applied this doctrine to their businesses. They said the thing we should do is gobble up the weaker businesses, then that way we'll become stronger ourselves and throw our weaker competitors out of business. This was what they were doing, folk. And using Darwin, it's called social Darwinism. Social Darwinism. Now, in addition to Rockefeller and Carnegie, there were other big tycoons like J.P. Morgan. I think we'll talk about him later. Oh yeah, J.P. Morgan, he's on the next page. In addition, there was the invention of the telephone in 1876. Now, if you look at the history of it, I would refer to Bell there. Bell was a man who was given credit for it. There was about 50 men who invented the telephone right within a week of each other. But in lawsuit after lawsuit, Bell was the one who was upheld because Bell had a document to show that he had talked to his friend upstairs before the others could document that they had talked. But someone tried to claim that they couldn't prove that they had talked. But basically, Bell was dealing with this gadget. There was a diaphragm with a wire wrapped around it. If any of you know anything about the telephone. And he said something to his friend who was helping upstairs, who also had the same kind of device, and they heard each other. And the man upstairs came down and said, I heard you clearly, I heard you. This was the beginning of the telephone. But he had documented that he had done it before anyone else had documented it. But the telephone was invented by several men, all at the same time. Then Bell's telephone began to be used over the country. The difference between a telephone and a telegraph was a telephone would actually carry voice transmissions. With a telegraph, you had to learn to code it. And the telephone was a much faster means of communication. The telephone quickly took over, came to widespread use, but nobody ever guessed that a time would come when we carry them in our shirt pockets. And I'm not sure that it's going to be legal in a couple of days to carry in your shirt pocket. Does anybody know?
It's going to be legal to carry. You just can't be on your phone. while
Okay,
you're
you
driving.
can't be on it. Right? Well, when I knew the law was coming, I used to, when I stopped at red lights, I'd check down and check the stone. I quit doing that. It always.
Now you can have your earphone or you can use your card.
Yeah, but you cannot hold the thing in your hand. But I guess you can still put it in your shirt
Buy
pocket.
first.
We can, push people to start buying the wrist. With the wrist on, you're not having it, you can communicate with them once a day or call.
The watch.
The watch, iPhone, whatever. And maybe the technology will start thinking, okay, see, they don't talk on the phone again, while driving, maybe we invent something, you can click on your ear and you answer a call.
Anyway, the telephone has come a long way, and again, they keep advertising really heavily. On July 1st, it'll become illegal,
Yeah.
and it will. It should, because let's face it, you cannot drive and text. Nobody. The young people think they can, they can't. And my wife and I were following someone recently, and I was glad to get around him, who was weaving badly out there. And we got close to him, we saw he was looking on his telephone. Now, that could have gotten a ticket. We did not get his license number or report him, but maybe we, anyway, leaving that. Now, the most famous inventor of all time, or the man who got the most patents, was Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison is most famous for inventing the light bulb, but he got 1,000 patents. He invented, he made improvements on the telephone and telegraph. He didn't invent them. He invented the record player and the tape recorder, and he invented the motion picture. But he could not harmonize his motion picture with the sound he made. It was to take the work of men later to do that. He tried to, get his recording device, his sound recorder, to play at the same speed as his movie recorder, but he couldn't. Try as he might, he couldn't get them to harmonize. He eventually learned that you put the sound on the same frame, the same tape as you put the picture. So you put the sound on one side of the picture. If you know what I'm talking about. But eventually we learned how to get the sound. Now, when I first started dealing with video photography, the older computers are not as good as they are today. And a lot of times you could tell a person's voice or a person's lips did not match up with the sound. Now that doesn't happen anymore, I don't think. But then at first, you could tell a person was saying one thing, but the sound would come maybe 2 or 3 seconds behind what his lips were doing. But again, I don't think that happens anymore. We have better recorders and better computers than we once did. Now, I'm not going to mention it, but somebody in your book doesn't mention Nikola Tesla. He's now got a car named after him, but he was forgotten about for a good many years. He was put under the rug, but today he's become famous again. Tesla gave us alternating current. Thomas Edison did not understand. Thomas Edison tried to sell direct current. It only works for up to 2 miles at the most. With alternating current, you can go hundreds of miles. You can step it up to 10,000 volts, step it down to 440 volts, then 220 and 110. You can do that with direct current. You simply can't. Anyway, Tesla gave us alternating current. J.P. Morgan, his was the finance industry. Morgan. There's still a company called J.P. Morgan Company. Finance. He was banking. He made multiplied millions in banking. Became extremely wealthy in that regard. And even presidents began to deal with him and his firm. President Wilson, for instance. Your book mentions Charles Darwin here on page 467 and his work on the origin of species, where that he believed that, well, I say this, I'm hard against Darwin. Adolf Hitler used Charles Darwin as an excuse to eliminate the Jews. Hitler believed that the Jews were inferior and had to be eliminated. And when you eliminated the Jews, the rest of humanity would propel humanity up to a higher level of evolution than what we are now. Again, he used Darwin to justify this, and other people have misused Darwin. Rockefeller and Carnegie used Darwin. First of all, Carnegie knew he could make a lot of money in steel. He was working at steel. He said, I could do better than Washington, if only. But then the churches were teaching against what he wanted to do. And then he felt like, well, God will disapprove of me. Then he read Darwin. And he said, if this is the way the universe is, I'm going to embrace Darwin. And so he embraced Darwin and made millions at the expense of a lot of other people who put out of business. All right. A lot of preachers began preaching the gospel of wealth. Women began to push for the right to vote. Women's clubs were formed again to try to get. Also, women began to try to push to get people to stop drinking. And this organization is still around. We don't hear much from them anymore. The Women's Christian Temperance Union, or WCTU, Women's Christian Temperance Union, tried to get people to stop drinking. Eventually, they were to get the 18th Amendment passed that outlawed drinking, but the 18th Amendment did not last. That's the only amendment we ever passed that was overturned by another amendment. The 21st Amendment under the 18th. The Women's Christian Temperance Union tried to get people to stop their drinking, believing that drinking was evil, and also the women were a lot of time victims. A lot of men who were drunk would beat their wives who would not do it when they're sober. A drunk man is more likely to lose his temper and haul off and slap a person than a man who isn't drunk is. Drink is known to loosen your inhibitions to where you decide, I'm going to do what I feel like doing, and sometimes what you feel like doing is something that will hurt later. Now, Braves baseball manager, former Brave, one day came home drunk. His wife scolded him. He slapped his wife. She called the cops. The cops saw a temporary red mark on her cheek as they photographed him. Bobby Cox had to face the Atlanta Braves, and he had to face his owners, Ted Turner. He had to face his boss, Stan Gaston. They had to face the whole team. But this time, his whole team knew about it. And, it was terribly embarrassing for him. But his wives came up to the like women would do and said, the whole thing was blown out of proportion. He never came drunk again. But again, had he been sober, he probably wouldn't have done it. He was not that kind of man, but he just came home drunk. And wife scolded him because he was drunk, which a lot of them want to do, and he slapped him. He actually drove home drunk. I mean, which is also is against the law by itself. He drove home drunk, came home drunk. His wife scolded him, so he just slapped him one. Something he never did again. And he had to face the consequences for it. When you're drunk, you don't think of consequences. You just think, here's what I feel like doing, and I'll do it. All right. We had another president assassinated. President Garfield was assassinated in 1880 and 1881, and shortly after taking office. James Garfield, he was a general in the Union Army. His assassination outraged me when it led to the civil service reform. Now, James Garfield was assassinated by a man who has believed that because he had worked for Garfield, he should be given a government office. Garfield was said, I'm only going to appoint people whom I know are good people, and the man who shot him was not Garfield's idea of a good man, Gritto by name. So Gritto decided, I'll take care of you. Like so many assassins, Gritto believed that Garfield was a tyrant and everybody was against him, and if he shot him, everybody would be happy. But he found out that once he shot Garfield, everybody turned against him, Gritto. Most assassins wind up telling you, when they're honest, that they regretted the move, that they expected a different outcome what came. Most people turn against the assassin, and the assassin has to flee. And a lot of times they're caught. Sirhan, who shot Bobby Kennedy, is still in prison. 50 years after it happened in June 1968. He's still there 50 years to the same month there. Never will probably be turned loose. He's in there for life. Been in prison 50 years. Anyway, Garfield was shot, and this led to the civil service reform. About to close, and ever since the days of President Andrew Jackson, when a new party came into power, they would fire all the old civil servants and hire new ones. But then it became realized that, hey, a lot of these people you're hiring are not better, and the old people were pretty good. Let the old people who are good stay on. And today's presidents do not start handing out numerous jobs by the thousands to their own supporters. Now, granted, the president still picks the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, and the Attorney General, but they don't pick a whole slew of New York officials. Generally, the FBI chief goes from one to another, and of course that's a controversial news right now because our present president fired the FBI chief. Time will tell whether it was right or not. Again, a lot of the issues that we are facing today were faced in very similar format by our ancestors. All right, now, what I'm going to do, we're going to end this right here, and our test next week will cover up to chapter 18. And I'm going to try my best to make sure that I only put on the test the stuff that I've written on the board, but it will be from chapters, what did I say? The last test ended at chapter, oh boy. All right, 10, 11, 12 through 18.
What about Haiti? Do we need to know?
What's that?
What about Haiti? Do we need to know?
About Haiti?
Yeah.
Oh, that was where the one successful slave rebellion occurred. Yeah. And Haiti made news when a big earthquake struck them. But they had one successful slave rebellion, the only one, where the slaves actually overthrew their masters and set up their own country. That occurred in Haiti in 18.